Now Becket limped out of his self-imposed exile back to Canterbury, bitter and broken, worn out by fasts and penances. Henry gave him the kiss of peace. Shakespeare's epilogue completed the hero's life. Henry died the grand old man of Europe, at peace with his wife and his sons, and his empire intact. The story was brilliant propaganda for Elizabeth, the fairy queen. She was an absolute monarch, just as Henry had been. Shakespeare had not shied from depicting a complex character. Henry sometimes ruled harshly, but he could also be tender. The playwright had shown the audience Henry the king and Henry the man. Imperfect, to be sure, but remarkable in person and triumphant over adversity. This is, of course, not what happened. William Shakespeare, the genius propagandist of the Tudor and nascent Stuart dynasties, never wrote about Henry II. Instead, he scattered his fairy dust over the Lancastrian faction in England's War of the Roses and the ultimate victors, his masters, the Tudors. When the Globe Theatre was moved across the river, the first play to perform there was most likely Henry V. The words I placed in Henry II's mouth before his battle at Dol, Shakespeare placed in the mouth of Henry V on the morning of the Battle of Agincourt, on St. Crispin's Day. Agincourt is one of the most famous battles in English history. Dol is known only to a small band of medieval historians and enthusiasts. And today, Henry II, the father of the Plantagenet dynasty that ruled England for 330 years, is largely forgotten. The word Plantagenet was not used by Henry and his contemporaries as a family name. Henry referred to himself as Fitz-Empress. It was first used as a surname by Richard, Duke of York, in 1460, when, as Richard Plantagenet, he claimed the throne from his mentally unstable cousin, Henry VI. Henry was trained for power, but he had to fight for all that he gained. By the mid-1170s he was Lord of England, Normandy, Brittany, Anjou, Maine, Touraine, and Ireland. The princes of Wales and the kings of Scotland owed allegiance to him. He not only won an empire, but held it all. His lands in France were 10 times the size of the French kings. Besides his conquests, he began a programme of unprecedented reform that set in place the rule of law across England. He was a patron of the arts, a man of letters, and he placed England at the very centre of European culture. He was a prince of the 12th century Renaissance. By any measure, this is a man who should be celebrated as one of England's greatest kings. And yet he is not. History might have judged and remembered Henry differently had, as one of his biographers speculates, he died in 1182. It is easy to imagine a pressing matter of diplomacy that required his presence in Normandy, a sea crossing, a violent storm, and the drowning of the king in the English Channel. Henry did not die in 1182. He lived for another 7 years. These were the worst years of his life. They were blighted by his failure to dominate a new French king, Philip Augustus, and renewed fighting with his sons, who would hound him to his death. Thomas Becket, Henry's archbishop, did not die in his bed. Henry's men murdered him in his cathedral church at Canterbury in 1170. The murder was the culmination of 6 years of bitter quarrels over the precedence of church or state. Just days before, Henry had exploded in anger at Becket's behaviour. At his Christmas court he shouted, "What miserable drones and traitors have I nourished and promoted in my household, who let their lord be treated with such shameful contempt by a low-born clerk?" 4 loyal knights, believing Henry wanted rid of Becket, sped across the sea from Normandy to Canterbury. As they entered the cathedral fully armed, they